is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business, coming to you live from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. It is 9 p.m. here in East Africa. Wherever you are, thank you for joining us. I'm Peninah Karibe. Let's begin with a look at the markets. The Egyptian exchange witnessed a mixed performance among its indices during the last session of the week today, in coincidence with the approval of the House of Representatives on the newly proposed amendments to the 2014 Constitution. The benchmark AGX30 increased 0.24% or 35.39 points to close at 14,984.46 points. Coming up on the show tonight. Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, faces favorable times days ahead of elections. The level of unemployment drops in South Africa. And UK Prime Minister faces yet another hurdle to push through a revised Brexit deal. Let's start in Nigeria, where despite the election's fever, the economy is on the upward swing. Latest figures released by the country's National Bureau of Statistics show that Nigeria's gross domestic product grew by 1.93% last year, up from 0.82% in 2017, and just short of the government's 2% projection. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmas with more on that story.
If there's one thing the new report from the National Bureau of Statistics shows, it is that the Nigerian economy is on the path of growth. Surely not very fast, but it shows some of the economic policies of the government may be yielding positive results. And nowhere is it more visible than in the agriculture sector. The government has invested heavily in agriculture through what it calls the Anchors Borrowers Program, a scheme by Nigerian Central Bank which grants farmers soft loans. The GDP figures show the initiative is working as the agriculture sector contributes far more than oil to the Nigerian economy. The sector grew by 18.58% year-on-year in nominal terms in the fourth quarter of 2018, driven mainly by crop production, which grew by 89.84%. Annually, the sector grew by 14.27%.
Agriculture survived the threats from security. A couple of states that were not producing during the height of the issues in the Northeast started producing. So agriculture picked up generally in the Northeast. Also in the Niger Delta, the amount of agriculture that happens there also picked up because there was also peace in the Niger Delta.
Another area of significant growth is manufacturing. The report shows the policy of the government limiting import while encouraging local production may be paying off. Fourth quarter nominal GDP growth of 2018 is put at 33.57%, way higher than the 9.20% recorded in 2017. It's the same thing in the information and communication sector, where telecommunications and information services grew by 16.67% in the fourth quarter of 2018, way higher than the minus 3.28% in the same quarter in 2017.
If our population is doing 2.5 to 3% per annum, any growth in GDP that is less than 3% is not real growth, because population is wiping out your 1.9 or 2%. It is when we start growing beyond 3% that we can really say that our GDP is growing.
It's something the government is targeting this year. It projects a 3.01% GDP growth for 2019, way above the World Bank's projection of 2.2%.
A lot of investment decisions are put on hold. But once there is peaceful election, as early as 1 week after the election, we expect to see a lot of investment decisions being made. And we expect to see the growth ramp up. So it's more likely that the federal government projection will be achieved, possibly exceeded, if, again, government helps the process.
But one aspect of the report that should give Nigeria a cause for worry is the oil sector. While it continues to remain the main revenue earner for the country, the report clearly shows oil production levels are coming down below budgetary targets. Production averaged 1.91 million barrels per day in the fourth quarter of 2018, lower than the 1.95 million barrels per day recorded in the same quarter of 2017. A continued decline in production would mean fewer earnings for the government and challenge economic policies. And to make things worse, the mining sector too is losing steam, growing by minus 1.23% in the fourth quarter of 2018, far lower than the 10.7% recorded in the fourth quarter of 2017. Obviously, you could describe this as a very positive GDP report for Nigeria. It also clearly shows that a lot of work still needs to be done in certain sectors of the economy. But then, Nigeria is clearly on the path of growth. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
As Nigeria counts down hours to the February 16th presidential election, President Muhammadu Buhari is set to make a special address ahead of the polls. On Wednesday, Buhari and opposition leader Atiku Abubakar signed a peace accord. Atiku says his ambition is not worth the blood of any Nigerian, while Buhari has insisted elections are important only if they make the country safe. The reason for the broadcast has, however, not yet been disclosed. Deji Badmos is monitoring President Buhari's national address. He joins us live from Nigeria's financial capital, Lagos. Deji, President Buhari is expected to make a much-anticipated national address within the hour. What is he likely to focus on in that address?
Well, Beatrice, that address is right on the way, and just before we came on air, I had been taking a listen now to the president, and basically the president has assured, I mean, that's what he did in the address. I want to believe the address is still on, it's not over yet. He's assuring that his government would ensure that there's security for the election and that he would do everything, that his government is committed to a free, fair, and transparent election. He also assured the international community, assured the international observers that he gave them that assurance now of their safety, that they are safe, that he would ensure their safety and that they should be free, to carry out their work without any kind of fear at all. He asked Nigerian youths not to be used by politicians to foment trouble, basically appealing to the people of this country, voters now, to come out on election day and exercise their franchise freely, choose whoever they want to choose. He also used part of the address to talk about what his government has been able to achieve in the past 3.5 years, basically saying that his government has been able to restore security in the northeast of the country, admitting, of course, that there are still challenges, and that he's waged a very fruitful battle, according to him, against corruption. And he also said there's glaring evidence now that the economy is back on track. So that's just a summary of what the president has said. And of course, as I said, he's still speaking. And well, I believe we will bring the rest of his speech now in the course of the program.
And Deji, that address by the president comes on the backdrop of the Delta Avengers militants threatening to cripple the economy if Buhari is re-elected. Should this threat be taken seriously by the nation?
Now, to be candid, if you ask me, I would say no. I mean, we've always said this. In 2015, we witnessed the same thing when some militant groups actually came forward and issued the same threat that if President Goodluck Jonathan at the time was not elected president of the country, that they were just going to ensure that the economy was grounded. The government, of course, has not responded to it. I don't think it's, I would not know how the government is taking this, but definitely, if you ask me, I don't think it's something to be taken too seriously. That's what I would say, too seriously. It's all part of the politics, because the guys who issued the statement also said they were endorsing the candidacy of Atiku Abubakar of the PDP. I think it's all part of the ongoing politics, and I don't think it's something that people should really, or we should really fret about.
Now, Buhari's government, Deji, has previously held talks with the militants to address their grievances. As a result of these talks, the group stopped attacks altogether. At least for about a year, we haven't heard anything. Why is it now an issue again?
Well, I think it's all politics. I mean, basically, I think these guys were reacting to another action by ex-militants in the Niger Delta. Just yesterday, a group of ex-militants in the Niger Delta came out endorsing the candidacy of President Muhammadu Buhari. And I think this is this latest threat now from the Niger Delta Avengers is a direct response to that endorsement. So basically, I think this is all about politics. We all know that the Niger Delta has been calm for quite a while now, because the government has actually held talks with the various militant groups in that region, and to a large extent has been able to address their needs. And that's the reason why we have calm in that region, and Nigeria is able to pump up to 1.9 million barrels of oil per day from that region, and they're still calm there. So for me, I think it's just the politics of the time. After the election, I think everything would simmer down.
All right, Deji, thank you very much for that. Deji Batmas live there in Lagos. Now, up north in Egypt's annual urban consumer price inflation increased to 12.7% in January from 12% in December. Inflation had cooled in December after an increase in fuel, electricity and transportation prices last year had sent the rate up to a high of 17.7% in October. Yasser Hakim with the details.
Inflation rates have increased in January, driven by the rise in prices of food and commodities by 3.8%, and the government has been pouring goods in the market to push prices down. At 12.2%, inflation is still much lower than 17% and 32% in January 2018 and 2017 respectively, after the devaluation of the Egyptian pound.
So far, flotation has succeeded in achieving its targets. Now, investors are much more confident about the Egyptian economy. Growth has picked up, unemployment went down, inflation leveled off eventually.
Meanwhile, the Egyptian pound has managed to pick up by 10% against the dollar after losing half its value in the last 2 years.
The reasons are that the CBE has intervened in the market to sustain the pound against the dollar. Also, the high demand of foreign investors for treasury bills in the Egyptian pound has also raised the value of the pound against the dollar.
The central bank's policy committee meets Thursday evening to decide on interest rates. Most experts believe the bank will keep rates on hold at 16.75% on deposits and 17.75% on borrowing for now. Rate cuts could take place in March or June by the most. As for inflation, it's expected to shoot up in July, when the government begins to completely lift subsidies on fuel, as per its agreement with the IMF. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And staying in Egypt, the central bank is due to make an announcement on the lending rates. Let's get more now from Yasser Hakim, who's live for us in Cairo. Yasser, what has the Monetary Policy Committee decided, and how much has the current rate of inflation influenced the decision?
Yes, Peninah, the meeting has just ended a few minutes ago by the Policy Committee, and they have decided for the first time in a year to actually cut the rates and cut the interest rate by 1%. So it's down 1%. And this is a new strategy, obviously, for the last 11 months or so. It has kept the interest rates fixed, hoping it will keep the Egyptian pound sustained and control the market and preserving stability. But right now, obviously, this decision to reduce interest rates by 1% means that there is a forecast of higher inflation in the next couple of months, and they're trying to curb that by putting down by reducing interest rates, trying to sort of encourage people now to go into the market instead of putting money in the banks, but to encourage investments. They feel maybe that also because the Egyptian pound has picked up in the last couple of weeks against the dollar, So it can also sustain itself without the need to increase the interest rates in the banks for Egyptian pounds, and that also it has yielded very well results in the treasury bills in the last month, with high demand from foreign investors for the Egyptian pound and the treasury bills. And I think 1% the CBE feels that it will not have any effect on demand for the Egyptian pound and Egypt's treasury bills.
And yes, so the government has been distributing subsidized goods, but has it been hard to control inflation?
There has been good results. If you look at the floating of the Egyptian pound in 2016, inflation shot up by about 32%. If you talk in January 2017, January 2018, it dropped to about 17.5%, and now we're talking January 2019, it's 12.7%. So in spite that in January it increased against last December by 0.5%, it actually has improved in the last year, year on year by 6 or 7%, and that's a positive news. However, what the government can see is that there might be an increase in the inflation, and it's trying to control that, knowing that it's important to address issues like consumption, like expenditure, state expenditure, and imports, which are still very much high compared to exports, and therefore the expenditure by the government is high, which keeps inflation high. So at this point, yes, the monetary policy is trying to control the hikes in inflation in the last year.
So what options does the central bank have to curb this spike?
Yes, first of all, they have to cut more on expenditure, and the government is working on that, although it might have another inflationary effect on the shorter term, and we're talking about lifting subsidies, for example. Lifting subsidies on fuel and energy will drastically reduce expenditure by the state and will increase revenue and income for the government, and this will help curb inflation on the midterm. On the short term could be inflationary effects, but not on the midterm. That will be good for the government. Also, there has to be more effort and work on encouraging investments and production. Production in Egypt is still not at the level that the government has hoped for. Foreign direct investments last year reached $8 billion. The government was targeting $10 billion, but that's due to the economic recession worldwide and the exit of foreign investors from emerging markets. And obviously, the increase in the oil prices in the last month or so compared to last year is a big challenge. So the government should work on these three forms to try to increase exports, get more income from tourism, from exports, from remittances from abroad, and also continue on the policy of reducing expenditure by cutting more on subsidies and government expenditure in the next year, and this will help curb inflation.
All right, Yasser Hakim, live there for us in Cairo. Many thanks, Yasser. And up next is a look at your corporate headlines. Kenya's struggling fashion retailer Deacon's East Africa is now planning to raise about $4.5 million to settle the company's debt. The funds will also be used at balancing towards the working capital requirements of the company, which is currently under administration. Through a notice released by the joint administrators, all members are required to meet on the 12th of March this year to deliberate on this resolution. South Africa's Sibanye-Stillwater has launched a formal process to restructure a number of its unprofitable gold mines with a potential loss of up to 6,670 jobs. The gold producer has started consultations with stakeholders on restructuring its gold operations following financial losses at 2 of its operations. The firm currently employs over 61,000 people in South Africa and is one of the largest employers in the country's mining industry. Chinese tech giant Huawei is working with South African partners to launch its first cloud data center in March this year. This is part of the company's plans to expand its cloud services across Africa. The center will be opened in Johannesburg, followed by another one in the coastal city of Cape Town. And finally, Europe's Airbus is scrapping production of the A380 Super Jumbo, abandoning its dream of dominating the skies with a 21st century cruise liner. The shakeup comes after Emirates, the largest A380 customer, decided to cut back its orders for the iconic aircraft and order a total of 70 of the smaller models instead. And that's a wrap of your corporate news. You're watching Global Business. Coming up, we discuss Africa's economic prospects for 2019 with the head of the African Development Bank.
The economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Peninah Karibe. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Here in Kenya, professional recruiting firm Shortlist has closed its $2 million Series A financing led by the Blue Haven Initiative. The online platform helps to connect African employers to vetted top talent. It combines technology and human touch to understand job seekers, fueling better hiring outcomes for employers across East Africa. Companies across Africa consistently rank human capital as a top business challenge and barrier to growth. So let's discuss this more with Doris Mwigei. She is the head of business development and marketing at Shortlist. So Doris, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Let me draw your attention to what the Shortlist East Africa MD is quoted as saying, that you are helping companies hire better candidates faster by ditching the CV. So that's a big one, because to a lot of people, this is their selling point. So if not the CV, then what is working and how is it working?
Okay, and true, it's a selling point because that's all we've had to use. We've never thought there's another option to do this. And what we use is we're trying to get away from a CV into using chatbots, into using assessments, because you and I know a CV doesn't really tell you anything about what someone can do. It's just a piece of paper that you're trying to sort of showcase your skills. Yes.
Okay, so chatbot, what is that?
A chatbot, yes. So a chatbot is sort of a computer program that mimics conversation, because we're trying to, as much as possible, humanize the recruitment process so that you feel like you're chatting to someone and as you're asking questions and answering, because sometimes technology can be a little bit too static. So how do we make it as human as possible? Yes.
All right, so it's some kind of live sort of chat going on. Okay, so what is it that employers are looking for? Because so many candidates get locked out of jobs.
That's a really, really interesting question, and one that we keep answering as we go along. Because I'll give an example. An employer will tell you, I'm looking for an MBA. But when you really, really dig deep, they're not looking for an MBA. They're just looking for someone with really good critical thinking, good problem solving, maybe learning agility.
And they say they want experience, which a lot of people don't have.
Exactly. Yes. So all we are saying is, do you really need that MBA? Yes, sometimes you do need it, but chances are that's a language you know. So how do we break that down into probably you're just looking for someone's ability to be able to do what you're looking for in terms of critical thinking, and not necessarily what your idea of is. And so they miss a lot of really, really great candidates who don't have the classical MBA, but can really, really do the job. And we're trying to change that in the market.
So how do you do it?
So we use assessments. So we say, let's pack the CV. Let's assess everybody on one equal level playing field by using assessments, by measuring them on what they are going to do in the job. A finance assistant should be answering questions around their ability to maybe look at a balance sheet, how they would probably use Excel, and not just look at a CV and say, well, you know, this looks like a finance person who can do the job. So we're trying to change that. A salesperson should be, you should be listening to a voice recording of a salesperson. That will probably give you more judgment on whether that person can do the job more than just looking at a CV. And that's where we're coming from. There's other ways to do this that probably make your recruitment process faster. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So some critics, for example, here in Kenya have argued that the education system doesn't really help much because it is so grades oriented as opposed to skills. Do you share that perspective?
So not from the education sector, so probably not in a place to answer from that perspective, but I know what the employers want. An employer is just looking for someone who can do the job. They're looking for some way to show. So maybe not a lot of theory, not a lot of memory. Do you have critical thinking? Can you problem solve? So yes, they are looking for more ability of you to show your skills, rather than you can get a first class. That's probably might not necessarily be relevant for what you're looking for at that time.
And at this point, somebody might be saying, okay, so we have unemployment rates that are just crazy in Africa. Are the jobs really there? Are they?
Yes, because see, that's the thing. I see so many jobs posted, and I see so many candidates looking. So we are trying to see what is the problem, where is the mismatch between the two. We've just completed a survey of over 200 HR and hiring professionals in Kenya, and 96% of organizations are hiring, sometimes all of them almost increasing by 100%. So there is hiring going on, there's open jobs. It's probably just, we're trying to say, it's probably a mismatch, where either an employer doesn't know how to get the right people, or candidates just are not getting the experience that they want, and they could be struggling.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so yours is quite a unique hiring process or recruitment process, if I were to call it so. And since 2016, when you launched, how much success have you had?
A lot. It just makes sense. It's intuitive, and that's a really good question, because we are probably looking at 130 clients in 3 years. Our success rate in the market at the moment is over 80% per job, which is really, really leaps and bounds higher than what a normal Kenyan recruitment firm would get.
Okay.
Yes.
My news director tells me we're out of time, but I have to ask one final question very briefly. It sounds like your process is very IT heavy. For the setup in Africa, where we still have quite a majority of people who do not have easy access to internet, for instance, do you think that maybe you're locking out a huge chunk of people from getting such opportunities?
So we have roles that run even in the remotest parts of Kenya, looking for sales representatives and all. What we've done is that the technology we use it's probably one of the best ways we've done it. It's very phone friendly. So you can actually easily pick up your phone with as little data as you have and use it. Yeah. So we are making it as much as possible, very mobile friendly, very easy to use, so that anybody can have access to the recruitment portal from all over the world, all over the country.
All right, and of course you're expanding all over the continent.
Yes,
Doris,
we are.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Doris Muige with us here in studio. Now, mismanagement and corruption at South Africa's public corporations has been a recurring theme this year. However, the latest scandal at the Public Investment Corporation could touch every taxpayer in Africa's most industrialized economy, given that the company manages $150 billion of retirement funds for more than 1.2 million government workers. Uche Okoronko explains.
The unfolding crisis at South Africa's Public Investment Corporation has just begun to uncover a deep endemic corruption that has not only destroyed the firm's reputation, but could jeopardize the future of many South Africans. Public hearings at an ongoing commission of inquiry into state capture have revealed that the PIC is highly exposed to Eskom, holding 20% of all its outstanding bonds. Now, the struggling power utility currently accounts for more than half of South African state-backed debt, with about $30 billion in debt. The PIC also holds 1/5 of South African listed bonds and inflation-linked debt, and nearly 10% of the Johannesburg benchmark stock index. Other issues that have come to light include the purchase of shares in tech firm IO Technology Solutions and a plan to invest in the IPO of Sagarmatha Technologies, a listing that was eventually blocked by regulators. The concern is both companies are linked to a businessman who is said to be friends with the PIC's ex-CEO, Tanya Machila. Analysts are saying that it looks like the PIC overpaid for assets, and it raises questions as to whether top officials received kickbacks. The fallout from the scandal has been dramatic. It has been revealed that the gap between contributions received and benefits paid has jumped to $1.8 billion, the highest level in 3 years and the 5th straight year of shortfalls. If the PIC can't make sufficient returns to cover its payments, the government could be on the hook for the pensions of civil servants. Uche Okoronko, CGTN.
The African Development Bank says Africa's economic state is good, but while its general economic performance continues to improve, it remains insufficient to address structural challenges. The president of the bank, Akinwumi Adesina, says that the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area must be hastened in order to project the 15% increase in intra-Africa trade. Adesina spoke to CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi in Addis Ababa.
You know, people call me Africa's optimist-in-chief. I am very proud to wear that label of Africa's, optimist-in-chief. I really think that Africa has huge amount of potential, but we can't eat that potential. We've got to constantly be relentless, right, in making sure that we create environments that, allow people to invest in our continent. I don't think Africa should beg for development. It should develop on its own terms by attracting investments. And that's what our job is at the African Development Bank, is to push that frontier.
It's interesting that now we're seeing the bank talking about nutrition, talking about health. You have just launched the Continental Nutrition Scorecard. How is this supposed to work?
We don't really realize that, nutrition is not a social issue. It's an infrastructure issue, but it's just a different kind of infrastructure. It's a gray matter. It's a brain infrastructure. So when you have today 58 million kids in Africa, they are too short for their for their age, which means they are really stunted, And we account 22 out of the 24 countries globally that have stunting rates, that are above 40%. They are all located in Africa. No, that's not possible, because stunted children today are going to give you stunted economies tomorrow. I was talking today to the Deputy Prime Minister of Ethiopia, and he was talking to me. He said, well, look, we actually send 30 million kids, to school, free education they have, but stunting rate 38%. So if you have that level of stunting rate, it means that the kids can learn well. They will not be able to stay in school. They will not perform well in school. They will repeat, and they may not even have, great jobs ahead of them in terms of productivity of the workforce in the future. So we feel, as the African Development Bank, that we need to change that. People say we have the youngest population in the world. Yes, I'm happy about that. But I want that young population to be well fed, and so that they are nutritious, they're smart. What's the point of having the youngest population in the world if most of them are not fed, and therefore the gray matter infrastructure is destroyed? So that's why we've launched the African Continental nutrition scorecard to be able to track how countries are doing and to put some pressure. Because, we got to speak on behalf of the kids. They can't speak on behalf of themselves. But we're also doing it for the economies of Africa. Because Africa loses $53 billion a year to stunting and malnutrition. No, that's way too high. We have to change that trajectory.
The implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area tallies with what the bank has been talking, the African Development Bank has been talking about promoting intra-African trade. We still have some few more ratifications from member states to go, but how are you assisting the continent to progress as we wait for the full operationalization?
We got to start looking on the inside. We are a population that's so massive, right? Rapid middle class is growing on the continent. And so the launch of the Continental Free Trade Area is really exciting because you're talking about, a continent with the GDP combined of 3.3 trillion US dollars. Now that is the largest zone, free trade zone, since the WTO, World Trade Organization, was created in the 1940s. And so we have to continue, therefore, to trade more among ourselves. And that's why the African Development Bank is investing massively in how to make that happen through investing massively in infrastructure, in energy. We're investing $12 billion in the energy sector. Agriculture, we have 65% of all the arable land left to feed the world by 2050. It's not in Asia, it's not in Latin America, it's in Africa. So what we do with agriculture, we determine the future of food in the world. And so, but we got to make that agriculture a mega business for ourselves. And that's why we are investing $24 billion in agriculture as a bank, and to ask Africa to add value to everything, from cocoa beans to coffee beans and to cotton, And so what we're trying to do is to make sure that we trade within Africa, but we trade value-added products among ourselves, not just trading commodities.
In Kenya, the country's electricity generating company is planning to raise funds from the market, and it may opt to issue the first green bond. The green bonds will help finance projects in the energy and wastewater treatment sectors. KenGen has a 1,631 megawatt annual capacity, and it supplies 70% of the East African nation's electricity. The state owns 70% of the company, while the rest is accounted for by private investors. According to KenGen's CEO, the company will go to the market once it redeems its 10-year, $250 million bond in October. The bond was heavily oversubscribed when it was issued previously in 2009. The capital markets regulator is set to unveil regulations for private issuance of green bonds. To South Africa now, and the tourism sector has registered a flat peak during the holiday season due to continued fears about the city's drought. In 2018, the country registered a 9.6% growth rate. This shows that there still remains some hesitance from international tourists. CGTN's Travis Andrews has the details.
Cape Town's peak holiday season is drawing to a close, with beaches, restaurants and hotels slowly beginning to thin out. But this season's festive period didn't look all that encouraging. Visitor numbers are easing, and most point to continued concerns about the drought and fears that some tourists still hold about visiting a region where the term Day Zero was just a recent phrase used to describe a waterless Cape Town. While the inbound tourism numbers show that drought concerns are slowly waning, it's also not entirely off everyone's minds.
A lot of people did report that there was an impact felt by the drought, either in lower numbers or in shorter stays, or with people not wanting to book because they were still concerned about drought issues.
But a lot has changed. Water restrictions have eased, and Cape Townians are even allowed to use potable water to top up pools, which is a great step forward from the Day Zero scenario. Hotels are also attempting to regain the peak season capacity they once enjoyed, and traders in the informal tourism sector are yearning for a good run of business. It does seem, though, that markets may recover slower than most think. It was just a few months ago that this water collection point was packed daily, with desperate Cape Townians hoping to avoid Day Zero. Now the gates are locked and not a single person is in sight. A lot of education and marketing campaigns, though, have gone into informing tourism companies, airlines and agents of the changing water scarcity conditions.
We've worked really hard to change that narrative, to tell people that the dams are full, they can come back. And I think people are now really reconsidering Cape Town and the Western Cape. And then obviously the other factors now come. It's price, time of year they want to come back.
So efforts are continuing to once again position Cape Town as one of the top holiday destinations in the world, so that the tourism sector can continue to thrive and create jobs and contribute to the economy. But it seems it may just take a little while longer. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
You're watching Global Business. Straight ahead. UK Prime Minister faces yet another hurdle to push through a revised Brexit deal. And negotiators begin crucial talks to end China and US trade dispute.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Let's look at other big stories of the day. At least 43 people are missing after an overloaded boat sank in the Niger River. The accident happened in Sambera, southwestern Niger, near the border with Benin. Reports say the vessel was carrying a large consignment of cereals and about 100 passengers. 62 people, most of them from Benin, were saved. It is believed the overladen vessel sank due to powerful winds. In Zimbabwe, at least 24 miners who went down 2 mine shafts on Tuesday night are feared dead after a dam wall collapsed and flooded the underground mines where they were panning for gold. Efforts to reach the miners have been hampered by a shortage of equipment to pump out the water, to pump water out of the submerged mines. The Civil Protection Unit is leading the search and has appealed to large mining companies in the province where the tragedy occurred to provide generators and water pumps. Commanders from AMISOM have been meeting in Somalia to discuss a new concept of operation and exit strategy after waging a decade-long offensive against the Al-Shabaab. The force is expected to cut back its troop numbers at the end of February by 1,000 as it slowly gears towards handing over security responsibilities to Somali forces. AMISOM has lately been on the receiving end of a deadly Al-Shabaab campaign that includes raids on army bases and roadside bombs that has weakened the mission's ability. And Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission has begun the distribution of sensitive election materials in readiness for Saturday's poll. The election materials were distributed amid site security. This will be the 6th general election since the end of military rule in 1999. President Buhari is seeking a second term in office and is being challenged by former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. And that's a wrap of our day's top stories. Now to the latest from Brexit. UK Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit strategy has been voted out in Parliament yet again. May is seeking changes to her deal with Brussels after it was rejected by a record majority in Parliament last month. She was, however, not in Parliament when the vote results were announced. If the lawmakers ultimately do not approve a deal under the current legislation, Britain is expected to leave the EU on March 29 this year without an agreement, an outcome many businesses say would be catastrophic for the world's 5th largest economy. Let's get more now from Richard Bestick, who's live for us in London. Richard, Prime Minister May's revised Brexit strategy has been defeated. What does this mean?
Well, let me try and put it in some kind of context, Peninah. The vote and the defeat of the UK government in Parliament isn't the end of Brexit. That'll be back again, probably around the end of the month when there will be significant votes. What it is, though, what this vote indicates, though, is the mood in Parliament here. Excuse me, I seem to have lost my voice. It is an indication of the mood in Parliament and the troubles ahead as Theresa May, the UK Prime Minister, struggles to get Brexit over the line before the country departs the European Union on March 29th. They will be wondering also in Brussels and looking at it, and there will be a significance there. They'll be asking themselves, why should we make concessions in the renewed talks over the withdrawal agreement when it's apparent Theresa May has got full control of her parliament. So an embarrassing defeat for the government here. Really the significance lies in Brussels, where they will be saying we will not be making further concessions until Theresa May demonstrates she can get some kind of agreement from a fractious parliament. And of course it all goes into the mill of the Brexit problem that faces the British government, struggling as it is.
All right, I'm afraid we've lost Richard Bestick in London, explaining to us what exactly that defeat means for Brexit. Now, a look at the ongoing trade tensions between China and the United States. Negotiators from both nations have kicked off a two-day fresh round of high-level trade talks in Beijing. The officials are hoping to resolve the festering dispute that has cast a shadow over financial markets as well as the global growth outlook. The pressure to seal an accord ahead of a March 1st deadline set by U.S. President Donald Trump appears to have eased slightly after Trump indicated he was open to extending a trade truce depending on the progress in Beijing. The delegation is being led by Chinese Vice Premier Liu He and U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. All right, so let's go back now to the UK. Luckily, we have Richard back. Richard, good to have you back with us. So 43 former British ambassadors and high commissioners are now calling on the Prime Minister to extend that Brexit deadline, which is, by the way, the 29th of next month. Is this a possibility?
Yeah, it is increasingly a possibility, and today's defeat for the government probably adds to that possibility. Those ambassadors are joining a growing call from industry and business in Britain as well.
Well, we do apologize for that technical glitch with his connection. Now, Chinese consumer finance giant Ant Financial has agreed to buy London-based payments company World First in a deal believed to be valued at around $700 million. The acquisition comes after an attempt by the Alibaba affiliate to buy U.S. remittances firm MoneyGram was blocked by U.S. regulators last year, citing concerns over national security. The purchase marks the Chinese company's first big move into the UK, although its Alipay service is already accepted by some of the merchants there. And Financial says the move would allow the two companies to reach a greater number of customers, especially in cross-border e-commerce. Valentine's Day has no doubt been a multi-billion-dollar boon for retailers and restaurants in the U.S. However, this year, fewer Americans appear to be celebrating as opposed to a decade ago. But according to the National Retail Federation, those marking the event are still spending more than ever.
Eli & Company Fancy Diamonds is in the heart of Beverly Hills. It's among the leading diamond and gemstone dealers for the Valentine, who already has everything. Eli's Valentine's offerings this year include a 10-carat natural fancy pink diamond ring for $29 million US. If that's too much, there's a natural fancy purplish pink diamond ring for $400,000 US.
This is the Noor Magnificent Emerald, 190 carat plus.
The 18th century historical Noor Magnificent Emerald is also on the market. At over 190 carats, it will set you back $55 million US. Too much money. Well, there's also the rare 38 caliber Noor Diamond Revolver with diamond bullets. The revolver includes 200 carats of pink, yellow, white, and fancy colored diamonds, yours for $1 million US.
What makes this Valentine so special, we have some unique pieces, as in heart-shaped diamonds, intense pinks or vivid blues or intense blues at wholesale prices.
Analysts say that the tradition of celebrating Valentine's Day across the United States is expected to be down this year, with fewer people marking the holiday. Still, those who do buy gifts are expected to spend a record $21 billion. That's an increase of 6% over last year's $19.6 billion. Industry surveys say that the average Valentine's Day shopper will spend about $162. That's an increase of 13% from last year.
For groups that are 35 and under that are not participating in Valentine's Day are going to spend money on themselves. They're going to spend money on going to a spa. They're going to spend money on going to a restaurant. Not on a significant other, but they're going to spend money on themselves.
Eric Butterbaum Design specializes in over-the-top glamorous floristry. This week, the Melrose Design District Floral Studio is working around the clock, creating and delivering 400 to 500 orders just for Valentine's Day alone. The arrangements have 50 red roses at a cost of $400. Diamonds may be a girl's best friend, but flowers are a little easier on the wallet. Song Yaotian, CGTN.
Let's look at the commodities market. Gold was a little changed today as investors awaited clarity on the ongoing trade talks between Washington and Beijing, and the U.S. government shut down with a strong dollar and stock markets pinning prices near $1,300 an ounce. Oil, on the other hand, rose for a third day to reach its highest so far this year as financial markets drew support from investor optimism that the U.S. and China can resolve their trade dispute. Still ahead on Global Business. A self-taught scented candle maker in Kampala makes a killing on Valentine's Day's demand.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
A self-taught scented candle maker in Kampala, Uganda's capital, is doing brisk business in the lead-up to Valentine's Day. The former software engineer incorporates dozens of scents into her customized gift candles, some of which have insect-repellent qualities. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has more.
After graduating from university, Ruth Uwimbabazi was unable to find a decent job, so she decided to set up a company that produces scented handmade candles. The 25-year-old who lives in Kampala, Uganda's capital, studied software engineering. She says unemployment pushed her to start her newfound career in 2016. Ruth learned to make candles by watching tutorials online, and her business was inspired by her love for scents. With a $1,300 capital, she ventured out on her own.
I grew up loving perfumes, and then I had a very good memory of I would smell the fragrance and say, my mother at this point was such and such a scent. So I knew eventually I wanted to branch into a business, but I wanted it to be a scented business. Not just candles as is, but I was willing to go anywhere into anything scented. But I like candles. I feel like they're very sentimental. So that's when I decided to come up with the idea to make scented candles.
Consumer demand for luxury products is on the rise in Africa, and entrepreneurs like Ruth are targeting a growing middle class that's looking for finer things. The entrepreneur sources her ingredients both locally and abroad. She tries to keep her candles as natural as possible.
My candles are soy blend, so that means I use soy wax, which is the best. It carries the fragrances really well, and also my fragrances are natural. The essential oils and the fragrances that I use are very natural. So there's no effect, no heavy effect. The candle was too heavily scented. It almost felt like it had a choking effect. It's because the products that I'm using are natural.
Ruth runs her business from her house and hires workers to help out when needed. The entrepreneur has a range of 15 scents under the Nkwanzi Scents brand. Her candles come in raspberry sangria and Mediterranean fig scents, among others. They sell for between $13 and $19 each, depending on size. Nkwazi Sen's business is booming as many clients are looking for gifts to celebrate Valentine's Day.
For this Valentine's, I decided to get these amazing candles for someone I will not say, but I am very sure they will like them because they are my best scents. I chose my best and I know they'll be amazing.
The candles are available to shoppers online. Ruth is working on plans to expand her production capacity and grow her business to reach more clients across the country and beyond. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
With just over 3 years of existence, the Lionesses of Africa continues to make greater strides across the African continent. Hundreds of thousands of women are now part of the network, which helps connect female entrepreneurs to each other. Here's CGTN's Julie Sher with that report.
Lionesses of Africa has been around for just over 3 years, but it's fast becoming the pride of the continent. Over 600,000 female entrepreneurs are part of its network, which enables women from all over Africa to connect, share advice, experiences, and business opportunities.
We are growing community, one woman or entrepreneur at a time in every country. And the good thing is women are extraordinarily good when they belong to a community that is for them, by them. They're very good at referring one another. So now we actually grow organically.
The platform is still seeing phenomenal growth with 30,000 new sign-ups every month. There's been a considerable increase among young startups.
We're seeing some really interesting young women who are building really interesting businesses. Not traditional businesses, predominantly digitally focused, because that's what they understand. And it will change the dynamic of the economy for Africa going forward.
My vision and mission is to be counted amongst the giants, in this industry. So it was quite a good move on my part to reach out to them, because then they responded and they did a feature on me, and that has really assisted in terms of my profile as a businesswoman, as a young black businesswoman.
The two biggest barriers to developing women-owned businesses are access to new markets and funding. Lionesses of Africa is committed to changing this trend.
Just being able to showcase my product here, I think it's probably going to take another step, and I'm hoping it will. And probably looking at another collaboration with maybe a couple of other women here that I'm hoping to touch base with after this, and let's see where it takes us.
Women entrepreneurs can change the mindset by actually believing in themselves, because half the time we like to second guess ourselves, and if we walk in our strides and know that what we want to do, yes, we definitely can do it, then we can definitely change the workplace. We can change the entrepreneurship landscape.
Lionesses is well on track to reach its target of connecting and helping to make the lives of 1 million women across the continent a little easier. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And finally, let's look at the currencies. The Kenyan shilling was broadly stable against the dollar today, drawing support from inflows by offshore investors buying government debt. South Africa's rand, however, weakened past 14 per dollar as state-owned power utility Eskom imposed a 5th day of electricity blackouts that have discouraged investors over the economy days before the annual budget. Let's leave it there tonight on Global Business. But we invite your feedback. Send it to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platform. I am Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.